Welcome to the Federal Youth Network Virtual Learning Series. Please note that this session will be in English. There will be a French session offered at 2:30 p.m. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am here on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you are on as well. Today's session is an Ask Me Anything panel. You will have the opportunity to ask our panel about hiring, job mobility, and other HR-related topics. As we move through today's session, please ask your questions by using the Q&A button in the official language of your choice. Before asking questions, please review the Q&A and see if that topic has already been asked. You can vote for questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Please do not provide any protected or personal information. Keep questions as general as possible so that the whole audience will benefit from it. This session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel later today. To make the most out of this session, please make sure that your question relates to the topic of today's session. I'd like to hand off to the moderator today, Marcus.
Hey, thank you so much. So, hello everybody. My name is Marcus, and just to reiterate some of these instructions that were just covered here, we want to remind everybody that all of your microphones and cameras are deactivated. So, no trying to hop in here and try and get your question all the way to the top. We do have is that Q&A button at the bottom. If you've used Zoom before, this should be pretty familiar for you, but very important, you're going to want to make sure that you are voting for which questions you actually want to see. And you can do that by hitting the thumbs up button. That's just going to move that question up the queue so we kind of know what is more of a relevant topic to the attendees, and hopefully we can answer that. Of course, if you want to use the chat function, then you can feel free to add comments. We'll be reading all of that as well. And when you do that, make sure to just choose everyone so then that way we have an idea on what's going on. So, like I said, my name is Marcus. I'm currently working as an epidemiologist within CCDIC as part of the STBBI Surveillance Division. And I've moderated a couple of these panels. And so I'm happy to be back right now because this is a really important topic. And speaking of said topic, we can move over to our learning objectives for today, which essentially, if you took a look at it, we're going to be talking about staffing and HR. Of course, just in general, the Federal Youth Network, the whole point of this is just to make sure that there is that safe place for young professionals to ask the questions that they can't find the answers for anywhere else, honestly. When you first join the public service, it can be pretty confusing. And so that's the whole point of these series. And of course, our panelists of guests will share the answers, resources, and perspectives just to guide individuals towards finding their own solutions to common problems that you just might encounter. And every single month, we do tackle a different area, starting from learning plans and performance agreements, staffing and HR, that's this one, network and GC communities, and everything else. There's always things going on. And so you're going to want to make sure to stay on top of things with the Federal Youth Network because you can get quite a bit of information here. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's panelists. Starting things off, we've got Jennifer McPhee. So Jennifer, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer McPhee, and as it says in the notes, I've been a public servant since 2005. My 18-year anniversary is a Halloween. I am here today to kind of share my experience with you as both an applicant, a hiring manager, and an HR advisor, some of the tips and tricks and information I've learned over the years that have helped me advance in my career. HR is my passion. I love everything about it. So I hope to give you some advice today that will help you in your career and your journey in the public service.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And moving over to our next panelist, we have Lynn. Lynn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Marcus. My picture's not as cute as yours, but that's okay. So I'm Lynn Landry. My pronouns are she, her, elle. I'm speaking to you from Dieppe in New Brunswick, right beside Moncton, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I've been in the public service for 22 years almost. I know I look super young, but anyway. Half of those years I've spent supervising employees, started in the admin role and moved on to HR and did a bunch of stuff in HR, included almost everything actually, including staffing. So I've been at the Canada School of Public Service since 2018, and now I manage a super team of instructional designers who do core learning products for the public service. So super happy to be here today. I will be sharing everything I've learned in all those years in the public service, and we're very well accompanied because Jennifer McPhee is super smart. So thank you, Marcus.
No problem. Thank you. So before we get started here, we're going to launch a little poll. It should be pretty easy. You're going to see it pop up right now, and everybody just feel free to answer the questions that kind of pop up in front of you. There we go. I see the poll on my screen, so you probably should see it on yours as well. And feel free to just answer all those. But before we get the results on that, just to start things off, once again, a reminder, make sure to ask those questions. Make sure to upvote whichever questions you want to see asked on the panel. But let's start things by asking, what are some of the popular staffing terms out there? Because quite frankly, when I first joined the public service, I've only been here for 3 years, and there still is a lot that I just don't understand. So I think that would be a good place to kind of start things out. So Lean, would you like to help us out with that?
Yes, and it's a great point, Marcus. We use terms that we don't use anywhere else. We like to keep things secret in the public service. No, we don't. We just use fancy terms. So one of the terms that you might have heard is term. So what does it mean, term? So when you're hired on a term, it means that you're hired for specific dates. So you start at a specific date and you have an end date. It could be 6 months, 1 year, maybe more, maybe less. So that's what term means. If you're hired and you don't have an end date, the word we like to use is indeterminate. So that means you're with us forever and ever. But that's what indeterminate means, is that you don't have an end date. Another term that we like to use is deployment. So deployment means, let's say I'm in a position and I'm switching position, but it's at the same level as I am. So I might be working as, I don't know, like an AS6 at the school, and now I'm going to be an AS6 with Marcus at Health Canada. I hope I said that right, because you said a lot of acronyms, Marcus, and I think you work at Health Canada. We'll go with that.
I'm at
so
the
that's
public health agency.
Oh,
but...
see, I was close. You
close,
were like,
close.
FCTB, blah, blah, blah. It's like, whoa. We like to use acronyms all the time, and they change depending on what department you're in. So deployment isn't at level. It just means that you're switching your box. So you're switching your term box, or you're switching your indeterminate box to a different one. Two other terms that we use is assignment and secondment. Both of those staffing actions are temporary, and they're the same. The only difference is when we say assignment, it's within the same department. When we say secondment, it's outside the department, and those are also at level. And to do a secondment and an assignment, you actually need 3 people to agree. The person going, your current manager, and your future manager. So 3 people need to agree all the time. And assignments and secondment usually have an end date as well. And there's acting. So acting is when you're actually getting paid more. So you get in a box over your box that you are, and that can be for short term or longer term. So those are the terms we use all the time. I hope it helped.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that is good to know, even just for my own HR situation right now. Now I got the specific informations on all of that. And we are just closing up the poll right there. So does seem like a majority of people were hired through a GC jobs, followed by bridge from being a student. I do hear that is a very popular mechanism to kind of get in here. And then our second question, which is feeling confident in your knowledge of different ways to move around within GC. Well, 69% of you said no. So I think that this is going to be a pretty important session, all things considered, in that front. And once again, just going to plug it one more time. Q&A function, please use it, ask your questions, upvote the ones that are the most important, and then we can ask our panelists for their advice with all of their experience to hopefully point people in some of the right directions. So thank you for everyone to answer the poll, and let's get right into things, why don't we, with starting with a question from the audience. We've got, when employers look at previous performance reviews, what are they looking for? Is there any way that you can kind of maximize your chances of leaving a good impression? And I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer to start off this discussion.
So when you're talking about a manager in a staffing process is looking at past performance reviews?
I'm assuming so, yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's not really common practice. You'll see it sometimes on some posters. When the new system came into effect many years ago, that was one of the kind of rationales where they said they could be used. And you'll see, I've seen posters recently where it says you need to provide your last 3 years of performance reviews, but it's really not that common. And I would say, if I was using that as part of my assessment and I was the hiring manager, I would be looking for comments on, depending on how it lines up with the statement of merit criteria and what we're looking for the particular position, because the performance in a past job might not exactly transfer, as Lynn was saying. You know, just because you're at the same level doesn't mean we're looking for the same thing. Personally, I put a lot of value on core competencies. So I would be personally looking at your ratings there, working well with others, showing initiative and being action oriented, those kind of consistent skills that can help you, that will stay with you in whatever job you're in and are important. You know, you can learn how to do certain things, but the core competencies are really important. So that's what I would kind of look for. I don't know, Lynn, if you have anything to add to that.
I think you answered great. And when you ask, like, what could I ask them to put? Maybe if there's a specific example of something that you did that year that was really, really good, and they could add that to the comments. Like, Lynn took care of this project, which showed blah, 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 blah. Don't put blah, 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 but you know what I mean. That might be what you might want to get them to tweak. But I agree with Jennifer. Even as a hiring manager, even if my HR says you need to look at the last performance appraisals, I would only put so much weight on it, because the appraisal is only as good as your manager is going to make it, and everybody's different and sees it, unfortunately, with a different value. So
no, I think that is a fantastic answer from both of you. It's kind of focusing in on those soft skills. Previously, I had a supervisor who was just like, I would rather work with someone who I know is going to put in the effort to try and learn and is easy to work with everybody, because that just means that they're going to be a standard employee. And I think both of you kind of touched on that quite a bit. So really like the answers coming in there. Now, moving on to another one. I think that this is actually a very interesting question from the audience once again, in the context of someone who has just started out in GC. They're very early on in their careers. And so when you're thinking about like career advancement within GC, do you guys have any tips or tricks that you think you could start off with? Oh, yeah, hand up, go.
Yay! My best tip or trick is do your job well. Whatever it is that you're doing well. Maybe it's not your perfect fit. Maybe that's not what you want to do, but people are going to remember. I started at the Translation Bureau and there was a reception desk at the time. That's how old I am. But I did it really, really well. And I met people along the way. They're like, oh, I remember you from that time. I don't remember what we talked about, but I remember our interaction. And that left a good impression. And as I applied for jobs and going through the process, I know the process is difficult, but we need to go through it and like check your network. Sometimes somebody's like, oh, I have something temporary, and maybe you could do it as a micro mission, for example, to try to develop skills that you wouldn't in your current job. Be open with your manager about what you want to do when you grow up, even if you don't know what you want to do when you grow up, because I don't really know what I want to do when I grow up, but whatever. But then do your job really, really well, because you were hired for that job, actually.
That's very well said, Lynn. I'm not surprised, but I always say with my teams that have reported to me in the past, I always say, you know, have a good reputation, because managers see how you work, they see what you do, and then for those to movements, maybe some comments or even deployments or assignments, like you're kind of establishing yourself through the work that you're doing and other people seeing that. I can give you a personal example, and it's further to what Lynn was saying. It's like not being afraid to get out of your own box or to take opportunities to learn and do something different. So when I came into the public service, it was a very entry-level position and at a medical clinic at National Defense. And I was an HR person. I wanted to do HR. So I knew I had to be patient and take my time and try to find my way into my profession. I worked with a great team there. They were very supportive. An opportunity came, I saw posted internally for an assignment at level. So they were taking anybody at whatever level you were to go and do this really fantastic employment equity outreach program for students in high schools. So I was selected for that. I was paid at the same level, but it was an amazing experience. And what I gained through that was connections into the HR group. And they said, I was going on maternity leave shortly after, and they said, when you come back, we'll deploy you in. So I went in at level and worked my way through that, those groups and levels in HR, but it was by going and taking that chance to do something. And it was really interesting. So really just, if you see things advertised, if your manager's open to letting you try different things like mini projects, volunteering, put your hand up. It's surprising what you can learn and develop by volunteering for those extra things for your employer and in your own team. So any kind of project organization that you can do, it will transfer to other kind of, tell me about a time when you did this. Tell me about a time when you organized an event for so many people. Maybe it wasn't part of your job, but it was part of what you put your hand up to volunteer to do. So always kind of be on the lookout for those opportunities to spread your experience and your network, to increase your network, like Lynn said, get to know people.
Yeah, and also too, I know that I'm not technically a panelist, but just to throw my own personal story, because it 100% agrees with both of what you have said, is just take opportunities and really try and grow your skill set. People are going to take notice if you're working on different things. In my personal case, I was just trying to do as much as I could. And I'd like to think that I did a pretty good job, because when an opportunity came up on my team for an indeterminate position, I had a much easier time telling my manager, hey, I think I want to try to go for this indeterminate position. And then my manager was like, absolutely, like, we've seen you do all of these things. You're always trying to help out. And that helped a lot with my career development. So I think that both of you completely agree with that. Yeah, exactly. I'm the signal there. Okay, awesome. Thank you for that response. And we're going to be moving into a little bit more of like a technical piece with one of the audience questions here, which is talking about finding pools in GC jobs, because there might be a little bit of a lack of pools in GC jobs. So is there any advice how to maybe navigate through career advancement if these pools aren't necessarily around? And also too, starting out, might be a good idea to talk about what a pool is, just in case some people are not familiar. Jennifer, you can start us off this time. Okay.
So if you look at, I'm not going to bring up GC jobs here right now, but I can think the last time I did one of these sessions in person, I brought up GC jobs, and there were over 380 external posters, which may or may not create a partially assessed or fully assessed pool. So you really have to read the poster to understand what the manager or that department is trying to create from that process. So one thing is really read it carefully. I'm sure there's other sessions probably in this series that get into the details of reading a poster and understanding the nuances. So I think there are still lots of opportunities to get yourself into partially qualified or fully assessed pools. It's a matter of just if you have the email alerts set up so that you can, I don't know if everyone on the call has that, but that's where the system sends you emails every day to tell you, hey, there's a poster. It's a good fit for you, Marcus. You should apply. And I would say that pools, processes take a long time. Pools can be in place for years. So if I were in your shoes, I would make sure to continuously just be applying to those processes to get into different pools. And I think if you look today, there are some, they might not be what you're looking for, but as Lynn and I were saying, you don't know where you're going to be in a couple of years and what might lead to something that you want. So, that pool can be used for, it's usually not just like one specific type of job. It's a range, usually a range of levels, usually types of jobs. So I would just be trying to apply to anything that I found that was sort of in my line of work or interest, and just be patient. And as you can imagine, the more processes you're in and the more success you have, and the more you practice with the process of demonstrating your skills, you'll be in a better place for that dream position when it comes up.
So Jen, would you say that sometimes the job doesn't say it's for a pool, but it says in the poster, this will be used to create a pool, or
yeah.
maybe...
So it's in the intent of the process. There's always a line that tells you. So it's to fill one position now, it's to fill 10 positions later. The intent is just to create a pool. So it also gives you an idea if there's a vacancy at the moment. And sometimes managers are creating pools in anticipation of retirements, anticipation of growth, so you really can't be sure. There's indications in that, but in the meantime, when a process is being run, circumstances can change. So it might say the intent is to create one position. By the time the process is finished, it could be for other additional positions. So sometimes people, I find, when they think it's just for a pool, I see them screen themselves out or say they're not going to bother. But like I said, managers do a lot of work to create a pool. Assessing people is a lot of work. And we want to, once we put you in a pool and you're qualified, we would like to use it because it's, you know, it's an investment on all of our parts, and the applicants and the managers and the assessment board. So it may not look like it's going to be a job tomorrow, but it might just be at the right time for you. So if it's a job that interests you and it's not necessarily an immediate position, I would encourage anyone to apply.
And a pool means that it's for a process, for a job, and they're going to do the process, but they might not have a job for you right now. So you're hanging in the pool, you're swimming. And sometimes in that pool, it can be used to market yourself in other departments, depending on how it was run. So you could say, I qualified in an AS4 at Public Health Agency of Canada. I'm using Marcus as an example, for example, but maybe the Canada School has a job that's close enough that have the same statement of merit criteria, and they can use that to hire you in the position. So, or maybe they want to do a non-advertised, which they mean, oh, Marcus is my favorite, and he's not my favorite, but he's meeting all the requirements and he's the right fit. So I can use that he's part of a pool to justify, perhaps. So that's why you go hang out in pools and you do all that hard work. Does that help? But I really think it's like putting in the time, networking, doing the jobs.gc.ca, doing your job really, really well so that, like Jennifer said, your reputation follows you. And Marcus agreed with that.
Yes, I did. And thank you for the explanation on the pools as well, because I know especially too, when you're first starting out, it's like, oh my goodness me, GC jobs, there's so many different pools. You're not too sure how to really navigate that. And it does take a little bit of time to get yourself familiarized. But if I can make one more recommendation, every single time you fill out an application on a pool, just copy and paste your answers and put it into a Word document, because, you know, as time goes on, that your responses to a lot of those questions is going to evolve. And if you're applying to pools that are asking very similar questions, then it's pretty easy to be able to transfer that information over there. And kind of like what Lynn was saying, keep your options open. You know, you never know where things are going to go, and you want to be open to different types of opportunities. So thank you for your answers on that one. We're moving on to another question, which is asking about when you want to go for a promotion, let's say, how do you kind of find those opportunities that exist? Whether or not, let's take it in the context of going from, let's say, like an EC4 level to try to find like an EC5 level, or how do you start to think about moving upwards instead of just laterally? And Lynn, you can start us off.
Thank you, Marcus. I feel like we're repeating this. Well, I'm repeating the same thing. Like, do your job really, really well. Apply to jobs.gc.ca. Tell your boss what you want to be when you grow up. Look for opportunities, maybe at the Federal Youth Network or with the National Managers Community, or maybe a micro mission somewhere, is to develop those skills. Maybe it's a project that ended on in your team, and you're like, put your hand up, give it a shot, try it, show what you can do. Maybe there's an acting and it's only for 4 months. So, and I shouldn't say only, but it's for 4 months and you do it and you're like, whoa, this is a job I want to do. Well, you built that experience, and you can share answers when you go to the process or when you apply a jobs to say, I've actually done this. Like, I've done it for 4 months, or I've done it as part of my collaboration work in a network, or maybe you join, I don't know, the EE and diversity group in your department, and you get to do something different, a different type of analysis. There's so many things that you can do outside of your job, but again, do your job well, because if you're not doing it well, we're going to be like, ugh, we don't want that person. No, we're not going to do, but you know.
And just to kind of step in here, because I do think that a lot of the same lessons can kind of apply. Let's twist this a little bit before we move over to Jennifer, which is also kind of one of the questions that is in the chat as well, because I think it's still relevant, which is, with the HR and associated processes, that can take quite a bit of time. Do you have any insight on how long that could take? And also bundled into the question is, when managers are looking for individuals and trying to assess them, let's say they got past the initial process, like Lynn said, you've done everything that you can do possible to set yourselves up for that position, but what would a manager necessarily be looking for in these hiring processes?
Okay, so the first thing I would do if I was looking for a promotion, I would look on GC. I have my job alerts. So I am not currently looking for a new position, but I get them every day and I look at them every day. So I look at them every day because I work in recruiting and HR, but also to know what's out there and what's happening and just kind of interesting. I see different titles. I have mine set up more to be at my level. I'm old and I'm not ready for lots of change. So I'm not necessarily looking to go up, but at some point, you might want to go sideways and it's just good to know what's out there. So I just keep my finger on the pulse that way. But if I was looking to advance and be promoted, I would set it up so I got those notifications and I would look at the criteria that the various managers are looking for in those processes. And like Lynn said, I would determine, do I have those? And if I don't, I would start to make a plan to how I get that. So how could I do special assignments at work? I'd go to my boss and say, I really want to get to the next level. I noticed on a lot of the posters, they ask for experiencing managing finances. How can you help me do that? Is there any way I can do acting? Then I do this for 4 months because, it will get into the details, but sometimes if it says, the recent and or significant, sometimes it just says experience in, and that doesn't mean you have to have done it for years. So if you did it for 2 months, then you can get yourself screened in. So kind of like Marcus said, keeping those answers but paying attention to the words in the advertisement and the descriptions of what exactly they're looking for, and then kind of determining where your gaps might be in experience or training or courses and kind of work towards that in the background. In terms of what managers are looking for, it really depends on the manager and the department. So the statement of merit criteria, one of the many things I appreciate about government is that it's pretty transparent. Here's a piece of paper. Here's the criteria. Most times you get invited to an interview and it tells you what exactly is going to be assessed. Oftentimes an hour before you get the question or half an hour before you get the question. So kind of like getting those kind of answers, especially like we said, to core competencies and personal suitability questions, having examples of how you work well as a team, having example when you showed initiative, kind of always having just that really good example. I think it's hard for a lot of us to go in and say, oh, I did this and I'm that. But if you practice it and you really kind of sit and go, what, I did a good job there. So I'm going to be okay to talk about it. And then you just practice and kind of build on those examples. Processes can take, depending on, again, the situation, how big the process is. If it's a huge process, it could take a year. If it's smaller, it could be 6 months, but there's always different factors that affect how fast it goes. But yeah, it's not typically really speedy. So in the meantime, if I was applying for a job and I really wanted it, I would look at those criteria and try to just give myself more examples and try to build on that. So by the time I got the interview, I maybe have additional examples. If that makes any sense, but sort of think of, I have one example for this thing they asked for. Are there ways in the meantime while I'm waiting for the testing or waiting for the interview to increase my experience or increase my knowledge of that area? Because often there's knowledge tests. So study if you can for whatever the knowledge factors are, that type of thing. Don't stop preparing yourself just because you're screened in and you're waiting for an interview.
Okay, perfect answer, Jennifer. And from our previous discussion, now everybody seems very interested about this whole pool process. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and I'm gonna try and combine some of these questions together so that we can get just a more broad idea of how these whole pools work and the ins and outs of them, so that people understand, because they are pretty important, especially too when trying to make moves around GC. So starting things off, pool versus inventory. What is the necessary difference between those two? Should one be prioritized over the other? How does that all operate? And on top of that too, with the pools that are going around, and let's say inventories as well, that say always like at level, does that necessarily mean at level if it says, for example, a 4 and a 5 pool and you're entering in as a 4? I'm going to start with Lynn here, because you started us off with her terms. So inventory versus pool, we can start there.
So Jen, correct me if I'm wrong. Pool is when we're going to assess something. An inventory is just you're putting your resume. So Lynn Landry might decide I'm going to have an inventory for administrative assistants, for example, and I just want a bunch of names. Usually I think it's more technical stuff. Am I right? Jen.
Well, it doesn't have to be more technical. And I guess the question I would say is any process where they want to bring in your applications, I wouldn't have angst over what they're calling it. If it's partially assessed, fully assessed, inventory, if you want my application and I want that job, just submit your application, and then they'll inform you of the next steps, the hiring department. In terms of, like I said, you really have to read the poster and the intent of the process to understand what that department is trying to achieve in terms of, so when it's more than one group and level, it could be a poster just for deployments, and they're not going to be assessing anyone. They're creating an inventory of 4s and 5s at level, kind of thing. So it would say in the intent of the process or in the notes section that they're assessing for both levels, and that can happen. So you might, if it says PE4, PE5, very well, you could be being assessed for both. You could end up in the pool for the PE4 and not in the PE5 because the criteria would be different. See what I'm saying?
And it really depends on the hiring manager. So some hiring managers like inventories because it's just names and it's quick for them to pick up something. Others want to create pool. And the reason that often it's at level, it's less work for the manager. Like it's a little bit less work to say Marcus can do the job at that level because he's already doing the job at that level. And we can actually, as a manager, say, here are the examples. So I think and it all has to do with timing. It has to do with how the department thinks about staffing and what's the next step. Maybe there's already, like they want to pool right now for later. Like you don't really know. So I agree with Jen. If there's something that interests you, no matter what they call it, just apply, even though it might feel like a lot of work.
And don't be afraid to ask, every poster has sometimes a name and sometimes it's a generic email, but it's there for a reason for any questions. So if you don't understand something about the poster or you want to have a specific question, a nuance that's not clear, I would reach out to the person on that poster and ask. We want to have good applicants. We want people to apply and be successful. So the person on the other end their interest is to hire from this process. So they're interested in supporting applicants to put their best foot forward.
Okay, so just to kind of summarize that, to make sure that I'm understanding it properly as well, is it's very important to just read what the actual posting is. It could use some sort of generic term, whether or not inventory, whether or not pool, but you want to really go in and assess what they're looking for, because then that will give you a better idea as to, this is something I'm interested in. I want to get the information. Is this going to be worth it? Does that also extend to then if I see a pool open for a level that is above mine? Should I also, and I want to get to that level, but technically I'm not there yet, and it does say at level, is that another instance where I should investigate what that posting is about and then potentially put an application forwards?
Yes. I would say personally, I would never recommend that a person screens themselves out unless it's blatantly clear. You don't have, I can't be an epidemiologist, so I'm out. But
not with that attitude.
No. No. But if it's if I think, I have this experience, another thing that you should remember is that you have experience outside the government. So don't forget when the criteria is there to think of your other life experience that might be able to meet that criteria. So experience, organizing a big event, everybody sort of kind of thinks like, oh, it's what I'm doing here in the government, but that's not necessarily true. So, just think outside the box a bit and about all your life experience. And then just don't be the one. Like if you don't have it, the manager will screen you out, and then you'll have practice, answering those questions, and then they'll come back and you'll find out why you didn't meet. They'll tell you why you're screened out. And then to Marcus's point, that answer for how you wrote it doesn't necessarily meet the criteria and why. So you'll perfect it for the next process. And that goes to the nitty gritty of, I'm going off track, but screening questions are very important when you're applying. So, don't get yourself screened out because you felt you were being repetitive or tedious. If it says, tell me about a time, tell me when, where, and how, speak from the first person and repeat exactly dates, times, so that if it says 3 years, make sure that the person reading that application can see exactly where those 3 years were, and that they don't have to try and figure it out. That's the best way to get screened in. It can sometimes be repetitive. You might go to the next question, and just the type of experience, you have to kind of repeat it. But my recommendation is just put the work in. And like I said, do not be the one that screens yourself out if it's something you're interested in.
Perfect. That's a fantastic answer. I mean, obviously it's one of those things where it's like, don't limit yourself, because if you are limiting yourself, then, you miss all the shots that you don't take. I think that's the line. I might have messed that up, but it's something along those lines. And so just to close out this discussion as to pools, do pools expire? Do you need to re-enter pools? How does that whole process work? Lynn, would you like to shed some light on that?
Sure. Pools can expire, but it's not you as the candidate that will make that decision. It's the hiring manager. So when they set up the pool, they usually have to give a date. It'll be good for this many time. And sometimes we forget to say, oh, I want it longer, and it might expire. So that's when pools or maybe their requirements have changed since then, and it's no longer the same things that they're looking for the person in that role, so they let pools expire. So it does expire, it does happen, and it's very much by department and hiring managers.
Okay, thank you.
Jen has nothing to add. I'm so proud of me.
You nailed it in one. Okay, so that'll close out the discussion about pools. So let's move to, I guess, a little bit more of like the bigger picture types of questions. And one that is upvoted the most as of right now is there has been wind about budget cuts and hiring freezes across the federal system. Do you have any advice as to some of the implications that might be coming to some of those newer employees or term employees that are looking for that indeterminate status? Because let's be honest, everyone who's working in the federal service, that's something that they want to move towards unless they're planning on leaving government. And Jennifer, if you would like to start us out.
Sure. I think all my previous advice applies. Do your job well, be a good public servant, keep your eyes open for opportunities. I know that, there's been a direction on budget restraints, but the public service is still hiring. You can only go on to GC Jobs today and you see lots of notifications, lots of posters happening. So it's sort of I feel like you just continue to plan your career in the way that you would have, and, try to find the right opportunity for you going forward. I understand if you're a term, I would certainly have, anytime I was a term, I would have a conversation on a regular basis with my manager to see if I could become indeterminate. And oftentimes in certain situations and organizations, if a manager doesn't have the opportunity to make you indeterminate, but they know you're a really good employee, they might speak to their colleagues and look for indeterminate appointments within their own department for you. So, just really about communicating with your manager about your career and your intentions and any concerns. That's the best source of kind of career planning at this time. Them helping you find your way is the advice that I would have.
Okay, awesome. And Lynn, do you have anything to add to that?
And if anything happens in budget constraints, which I don't think we're fully in, like Jennifer said, we're still hiring, we still need people. Don't think it's because you're horrible either. Like sometimes hiring manager want to keep you. They really, really do. So leave on a good note if that happens. And who knows, maybe 3 months down the road, all of a sudden we're finding money that we didn't know we had, because the government is weird. Money disappears in March and reappears in April for whatever reason. So just don't get stressed about it. It's not worth it. Do your job really, really well. I know it's really hard. Don't forget there are people out there, like there's their employee assistance program that can help you and everything if you're feeling the stress of it, but they still need people to deliver services at the end of the day, right? So I know this indeterminate makes you relieve a lot of stress, but while you're navigating the term, do it well. Don't think that you're not good if something happens and you are let go. Maybe they'll call you back a little bit later. And again, I think Jennifer gave really good advice. Talk to your manager, make them clear about it, what you want. And I agree, Marcus, that's all what we really, really want when you're in the public service, and we'd like being there. But apply on jobs.gc.ca. That's where, like, often it's the department, they can't hire for longer than so long for now. And then the next month it changes and we can do something different. So don't lose hope.
Yeah, you got to make sure that that glass is still half full at the end of the day. And I'm very happy that both of you touched on that point about speaking to your supervisor, because, you know, a lot of these decisions might also be out of their own control, whether or not they have the places available. But kind of like what Jennifer was saying, you know, maybe there's an opportunity that they've heard of from somewhere else, and then they can make sure that somewhere along the line, you know, you've got a position to return to. It always helps just stating intent so that people know what you're doing. You might think that that might be a little bit uncomfortable at first, but at the end of the day, I feel like most supervisors are trying to support their employees because they were in that exact same position. And this is a professional environment. Everyone understands what the nuances of all of this are. So I'm very happy that you two spoke on that point. We are getting really close to the end of this session. And so I'm going to be swapping over to one more question just to close things out here. And this is I think a pretty important one, but do I need to be bilingual to be a manager? I'm going to start out with Lynn. You can answer this one and then send it over to Jennifer. How does the whole bilingual conversation enter into your job prospects, especially in the GC?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So if you're supervising an employee in a bilingual region, you will need to be bilingual. There is no if, where, and buts about it. There are, for now, positions in unilingual regions that you might get away, and I say get away in a not like get away, with one or the other of the language. So in Quebec, French, and elsewhere, mostly English. But really, depending how high you want to go, like you might be able to be a team leader and your team is only English and located in an English language of work region. So you'll get away with it. But if that's something you want to do, I find, and I know this is a tricky thing to say, but language is like getting a degree. If I want to be an epidemiologist, I can't say that word, I will have to go get the degree to know how to do the job. If you want to be a manager or an executive, you will need to go and get that level of bilingualism. Jen,
Okay.
was I
Well
too
said, Jennifer.
rough?
Yes. Well, and yes, and I would say the vast majority, as I'm saying, if you want to be a manager, yes, you're gonna need to be bilingual. And you know, I know it can be daunting. It was for me. I did full-time language training in my 40s. So, you know, that talk about going back to school, but it was humbling, but I got there. And I had, you know, enough French along the way, but just not the level that I needed for the current position that I was in. So I would say it will be limiting to you at some point if you're not bilingual. So if you can start now, like right away, as much as you can, if your employer offers on-site training, any courses, even in your learning plans, speak to your manager about setting enough time, a few hours aside every week to do. There's so many tools with the Canada School, with Morale, and all these apps that we can practice our second language. So I would just encourage you to continue to build on whatever base you have, so that it's surprising how fast it can come, especially the comprehension and written. Oftentimes people find the oral harder, but it just depends. But practice with your colleagues, and just don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because you know it is important in advancing your public service career for sure.
Okay, perfect. So we're just over time now, but I want to say thank you both to Lynn and Jennifer for answering all of these questions relating to staffing and HR. And now I'm going to hand it back off. So feel free to take us home again.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you so much for your amazing moderation. Thank you, Lynn. J'ai envie de dire merci à toi, Lynn, hein, parce que toi, je ne sais pas, je ne parle pas en anglais là. But anyway, thank you, Lynn. It's an English session. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, it was an informative session. We have one final poll question. The result from the poll will not be shared. So, was this session a good use of your time? Yes, no, I don't know. I don't know. Yes. Okay, now you have it. So just to let you know that yeah, the answers will not be shared. So yeah, feel free to answer, please. Okay, Career Bootcamp 2024 is only a couple of months away. Once again, we will be hosting the event virtually in January. Be sure to add it to your learning plan and register so you don't miss out. CBC allows all learners to attend sessions that interest them. Join us for the full event or pick 1 or 2 sessions that catch your eye. The choice is up to you. Thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, the session will be repeated in French at 2:30 p.m. So in a couple of, in about 13 minutes. Comme rappel, la session en français débutera sous peu. Resources will be available on our wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel. Be sure to join us next month for another AMA session where you can ask questions about networking and GC communities. Bye-bye.